What about his eating habits? Okay, so his father used to grow the food in the backyard, and that's all they would eat. What else? Did we not talk much about his food? We said, and I think this is where we ended. We said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas radiyallahu anhu came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said, Ya Rasulullah, how do I make my dua mustajab? How can I become one of the people who, when they turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when they raise their hands, their dua is accepted? And we said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave him two words, right? He gave him a two-word response. What were they? Atlib mat'amak. Purify the things that you consume. Purify the things that you consume, and you will be from the people whose dua is accepted. And then we gave the other hadith of the Prophet where he said that there was a man in the desert, Taweel al-Safar, that he had been on a long journey. He calls out to Allah in dua, but his clothes are haram, his food is haram, mashrabuhu haram, ghudhiya min haram. How is it possible that Allah would answer his supplication? Yes? Okay. So now let's continue. I have every intention, inshallah, of starting hadith number 1 tonight. Okay? So if I don't, then my apologies, but that is the intention, inshallah. Continuing with Imam Nawawi, bismillah. Who remembers, most importantly, what was Imam Nawawi's name? His name was not Imam, and his last name was not Nawawi. So what was his name? Abu Zakaria Yahya ibn Sharaf. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. May Allah bless you. May Allah bless you. Okay. So moving on with Imam Nawawi. Imam Nawawi, as we've already kind of discovered up until this point, was a man of austerity. Was a man of asceticism. Was a man who was of little physical needs of this life. It was said that the only things that he would eat, the only things that Imam Nawawi would eat, would be olives and cakes that his father would bring to him from Nawa. What's the correlation between the things that Imam Nawawi would eat and the things that we said previously about why he would only eat from his father's food? Who remembers? Huh? Who remembers? Yeah, Jameel. Mushkila. Big problem. Okay, because he knew for a fact that the food was halal. Right? If we go to the store, okay, and we purchase apples, can we guarantee that this is from a halal source? How do you know that the farmer who grew these apples didn't steal the land from somebody? You see, we think that our extension of halal and haram extends to the meat aisle. That's it. And beyond the meat aisle, كل شيء حلال ورزقكم الله من الطيبات, everything is good. Imam Nawawi didn't just have this to the meat and produce aisle. Imam Nawawi extended it far beyond that. Imam Nawawi said, I need to make sure that every morsel that I nourish my body with is from a halal source, not just the meat products. So Imam Nawawi would only eat from the food that his father would bring him. And his father would bring him olives and little cakes that his father would bring him. He would never eat anything from Damascus. He wouldn't even eat the fish that were caught from the river that ran through Damascus. He would not eat from the fruit of the orchards in Damascus. You know why? Because Imam Nawawi was of the opinion that some of the lands that were taken, where the produce was grown, were taken unjustly. You see, some of the orchards in Damascus during the time of Imam Nawawi belonged to some orphans. They were a waqf, something that was given to the orphans in order to be able to provide for their needs for the remainder of the waqf. And what happened was that the Amir al-Zahir, he took these lands unjustly, according to Imam Nawawi. So Imam Nawawi would not eat from these fruits because these fruits were grown on land that was usurped unjustly. Imam Nawawi would not eat from the fish of the river. Why? Because the portion of the river where they caught the river was part of the land that was usurped unjustly. It's a fish that flows through the water. And yet Imam Nawawi wanted to make certain that the only things that he consumed were products that were 110% halal. You see, his train of thought was, if I'm going to dedicate my life to talab al-ilm, if the energy that I consume is going to be used 110% for the worship of Allah, how can I worship and nourish my body? How can I use my body to worship Allah when my body is being nourished from the haram? Now think about that, and how does it apply to your life? And I always tell people, don't ask the question, does this apply to me? Ask the question, how does this apply to me? Because if you ask the question, does this apply to me? You might be of the mind frame, this may or may not apply to me. And even if you only eat the most pristine, hand-slaughtered meats that you can find, you slaughter them yourself. What about everything else that you consume? Be very, very cognizant of the things that you consume, ya jama'ah, because this is where the barakah comes from, as the Prophet ﷺ told us. To further this point, to see Imam Nawawi in action, on the day of Eid, one of the chief justices of Damascus came to visit Imam Nawawi in his home. And when he walked into the room of Imam Nawawi, who can remind me the description of Imam Nawawi's room? It was full of books from floor to ceiling, and if you wanted to sit somewhere, you had to stack the books and sit down. So Imam Nawawi, on this day of Eid, the justice comes and visits him, and he walks in and he sees Imam Nawawi drinking beef broth. Not with meat. There was no salan. Okay? There was no, it wasn't baya. It was just straight beef broth. And Imam Nawawi is drinking this broth. The Chief Justice asks him, it's the day of Eid. It's a day of celebration. Let me handle the food preparations. So the Chief Justice calls his assistant, and the assistant brings all of these fancy cooked meats that were being cooked outside because it's the day of Eid. All of these fancy sweets, everything comes into the house of Imam Nawawi, and Imam Nawawi refuses to eat this food. So the Chief Justice asks him, I mean, this is now a person of knowledge discussing with Imam Nawawi. It's not some normal person. This is the Chief Justice of Damascus. So the Chief Justice asks him, yeah, Imam, is this haram? Are you not eating this because it's haram? So Imam Nawawi said, no, I don't believe it to be haram. But this is the food of the tyrants. This is the food of people that live in excess. Imagine we have Postmates and Uber Eats and all of these different apps that now they bring the food to your home. Whereas on the day of Eid, Imam Nawawi did not move on his principles. If there's any doubt that Imam Nawawi was not a man of principle, this story should disabuse you of that notion. No doubt was Imam Nawawi a man of principle. If on the day of Eid, on the day in which all of us, to a certain extent, will let go a little bit, we'll relax a little bit, we'll have fun a little bit. Imam Nawawi was still ardent about making sure that he stuck to his principles. Was Imam Nawawi extreme in his position? What do you guys think? It's okay, be honest. I would probably say yes. Do you think Imam Nawawi is extreme in his position? A little bit, maybe? Okay. You see, even though Imam Nawawi had the means to do something, and this is not does this apply to you, how does this apply to you? Even though Imam Nawawi had the means to do something, he did not take advantage of those means. Where did he get that from? Was there ever an instance in the Sunnah or the life of the companions that they had access to something but they didn't take advantage of it? There's one clear thing that's popping into my head. Remember when Umar radiallahu anhu walked in to visit the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ got up from his bed. And what did Umar radiallahu anhu see? He said, I could see the marks of the straw mat imprinted onto the skin of the Prophet ﷺ as he got up from the bed. Do you ever put your face on something for a long period of time where your hand and the imprint of the material or something shows up on your skin? So exactly what happened to the back of the Prophet ﷺ. So Umar radiallahu anhu asked him, Ya Rasulullah, are we not upon truth and they are upon falsehood? Meaning the kings of Kisra and Persia and all that? He said, of course. He said, how is it possible that you, as Rasulullah, upon the truth, are in this type of condition? And those people upon falsehood, upon dalala, upon budlan, are living in palaces with thrones and the most magnificent beds that you've ever seen. So the Prophet ﷺ told him what? لَهُمُ الدُّنْيَا وَلَنَا الْآخِرَةِ. Let them have the dunya, ya Umar. For us is the akhirah. So Imam Nawawi realized that yes, because I have access to something doesn't mean that I should take advantage of it. And just because you have access to eat whatever you want, and to buy whatever you want, and to consume whatever you want, just because it's halal doesn't mean that you should do it. Imam Shafi'i was once approached about playing a particular game. Okay? How many of you guys own an Xbox? Nobody wants to raise their hand anymore? Okay. All right, I'll do you know who you are. Okay. Imam Shafi'i was once asked, how come you don't play this particular game with us? He said, I just choose not to. So they said, yeah, Imam, is it haram? Is the game haram? Is that why you don't choose to play with us? And Imam Shafi'i said, no, it's not haram. But I'm Imam Shafi'i. What does that mean? He says, I hold myself to a higher standard. Ya Jama'ah, you might have high standards for everybody else, but how are your standards for yourself? You expect mercy and kindness and compassion and sympathy and empathy from other people towards you. But when it comes to you towards others, how sympathetic are you? How merciful are you? How compassionate are you? How merciful are you with other people? What kind of standard do you hold others to, and what kind of standard do you hold for yourself? Imam Nawawi and Imam Shafi'i were clearly holding themselves to a higher standard. But the standard of who? The standard of the Prophet ﷺ. Why? Because remember, Aisha radiallahu anha also said, similar to a hadith of Umar, Aisha radiallahu anha said that moons would go by, and a fire would not be lit in the house of the Prophet ﷺ. Moons, months would go by, and not a single piece of cooked food would enter into the mouth of the Prophet ﷺ. And now we have double range, mashallah, multiple ovens with different settings and roast and this and that. Right? Very easy access. And alhamdulillah, this is a blessing and a ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we have such easy access to these things. But what happens to the hearts of people when we don't experience some type of hardship? When we can't go any day, when we can't go one day without eating a piece of meat, when we can't go one day without turning the stove on, when we can't just experience one type of deprivation for ourselves. We are a community, the modern society. I mean, we are a modern society that not only is instant gratification, but anything that I want, I can get it at any time, at any place. And even this is from the halal. We're not talking about the haram. From the halal, I can get it at any time, any place. The Prophet ﷺ, did he not have access to the treasures of Kisra and Byzantium? Wouldn't he take the spoils of war from the Quraysh and things like that? Could he not afford to furnish himself a little bit better? Could he not dress himself a little bit better? Could he not feed himself a little bit better? Of course he could. There were companions like Uthman who were very easily capable of doing so. But the Prophet ﷺ always held himself to a higher standard, which is exactly what Imam Nawawi and Imam Nawawi and Imam Shafi'i and others, may Allah bless them for their efforts. It is said that Imam Nawawi, and I'm going to try to speed up a little bit, it is said that Imam Nawawi would eat only one meal a day. One meal a day after Salat al-Isha. And he would drink enough drink to after Salat al-Fajr to last him the rest of the day. The scholars of old would say that most people, the bare minimum that a person should eat is once per day. Modern nutritionists, anybody a dietitian or anything like that? Buddy? Okay. Modern nutritionists will tell you that it is recommended to have a healthy metabolism to have how many meals per day? No. How many? No. How many? Huh? 6 meals a day. You want a healthy metabolism? You want to lose weight? You want to make sure that your body is functioning at full capacity? You want to eat 6 small meals a day. The ulama of previous generations would say that the minimum is one time a day. And if a person must exceed beyond that, he should only eat 2 times a day. And they said that the person that eats 3 times a day, let them bring out the trough for this person because he's just like an animal, essentially. So all he's doing is eating all day. And now, mashallah, we have time to have 6 meals a day. So Imam Nawawi was the type of person that would eat after Salat al-Isha and drink once after Salat al-Fajr, and that would last him the day. They would ask him, why are you so hard on yourself? Why do you not eat more? Why do you not rest more? Why do you not have a little bit more fun? Imam Nawawi said, knowledge is not attained by rest. A person will not receive even a part of knowledge unless he dedicates all of himself to it. And if a person dedicates all of himself to knowledge, then he may achieve a portion of it. And this is an actual very, very famous Arabic proverb. You give all of yourself to knowledge, you dedicate all the time that you have to knowledge, maybe knowledge will give a portion of it back to you. Because knowledge is not just about what you know. Knowledge is about how much you can retain, how much you can recall, and how much you implement on your own. Because if the knowledge is not being implemented, what's the benefit of it? Right? Like حمار يحمل أسفارا. Like donkeys carrying scrolls. How are you benefiting from the knowledge? So Imam Nawawi dedicated all of his time in the hopes that knowledge would receive, that he would be able to get some of knowledge. Imam Nawawi never received a stipend for his teaching at the university. On one occasion, and I'm going to get to a particular story now, but on one occasion, Imam Nawawi was known for corresponding with the Sultan in the area. And anytime that the Sultan would do something that the ulama or Imam Nawawi would disagree with, Imam Nawawi would go and visit with the Sultan. And he would tell him, look, I think you should do this differently, I think you should do that differently. And once the Imam Nawawi really infuriated the Sultan to the point where the Sultan said, cut off his salary. So the viziers were looking around at each other and they said, he doesn't receive a salary. Well, how does he live? What do they say? He eats off of the food that his father brings him from Noah. And the only money that he has, he uses to purchase books. You see, it said that Imam Nawawi for the first 2 years or so would receive a salary from his teaching. So he could buy all the books that he needed. And once he fulfilled the requirement of the books that he needed, he stopped receiving the salary. And then, even then, with the books, he said, once I die, the books are to be given as a waqf. I don't even want the books. They're not even my property. I'm just borrowing them in this life. Imam Nawawi never married. I'm going to switch gears here. Imam Nawawi never married. Imam Nawawi died, we said, at how old approximately? About 44 years old. Imam Nawawi never married in his lifetime. And Imam also Ibn Taymiyyah never married in his lifetime either. And a more contemporary student of knowledge, Sayyid Qutb also did not marry. Now, isn't marriage part of the sunnah? Yeah, Jama'ah, is marriage part of the sunnah? Might not feel like the sunnah sometimes, but I assure you it's part of the sunnah. Don't you think that a person like Imam Nawawi and Imam Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah and other ulama, don't you think that being who they were with the knowledge that they have, that they would have been the first ones to make sure that they implement every single sunnah that they could in their lifetime? You know, Imam Ahmad, rahmatullahi alayhi, he said, there was never a hadith that crossed my path, or came across my desk, so to speak, except that I implemented it. And Imam Ahmad has a collection of close to 1 million ahadith. Is marriage not a sunnah? He said, yes, it is. So he said, how come you're not married? Wouldn't someone like you want to implement the sunnah? Shouldn't someone in your position and your status and your knowledge want to implement the sunnah? Look at the answer of Imam Nawawi. Again, perspective. He said, I fear that I may follow one sunnah and as a result get involved in many forbidden acts. What does he mean by that? Anybody? By following the sunnah of getting married, he may fall into other forbidden acts. What does that mean? Nobody has any clue? What does it mean? Is your wife here? Okay, anonymous, I don't know who you are. Okay, yeah. Okay. Okay. You mean like hugs and kisses and that type of thing, or? Let's stop exposing ourselves here. MashaAllah. Okay. So the brother's kind of on the right path, okay? Imam Nawawi was afraid of, I may follow the sunnah of getting married, but I may fall into the sin of oppressing this person. Oppressing her how? By not providing for her needs, by not spending time with her, by not fulfilling my rights and obligations upon this person. So, I could fulfill the sunnah. But in the process, I might commit many more sins along the way. Why would I do that? And if this is his perspective on marriage, which I don't think anybody has an issue, inshallah, with getting married here, what does it say about the things that we know are theoretically impermissible, but we try to rationalize and say, well, I'm not doing it for that reason. 180 degree change of perspective from Imam Nawawi. He doesn't want to enjoy the halal for fear of the haram. We want to enjoy the haram. How? By rationalizing it and saying, I'm only going to do the halal aspects of it. I'm sorry? Mm-hmm. No, I mean, absolutely. And the Prophet ﷺ himself and Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Ali, all of them were married. No doubt that there's a virtue to being married. And people better than Imam Nawawi got married. No question about that. So I'm not saying that you should abandon marriage and go and live in a mountain. But what I'm saying is that Imam Nawawi had so much wara'. He had so much just, he wanted to focus on himself so much. He was so concerned about himself that he didn't want to get involved or entangled with anything else. If he didn't want to eat the fruit from the orchard in the city, you think he was really going to get married and potentially have, you know what I mean? So this is a lot of a lot of responsibility. The following is a quote from Imam Nawawi, okay, with regards to marriage. He says, with regards to marriage, that is all part of the goodness and kindness that people follow. This is where the woman serves her husband in those things that she mentioned, such as, she's talking about the hadith of Asma radiallahu anha. This is a commentary on the hadith of Asma. So Asma radiallahu anha in a particular hadith was laying out some of the responsibilities that she had as a wife. Okay, so Imam Nawawi is doing commentary on this hadith. So he said all of that, meaning all of the responsibilities of the wife, are part of the goodness and kindness that people follow. This is where the woman serves her husband in those things that she mentioned, such as preparing food, cooking, washing clothing, etc., etc. This is all voluntary work on the part of a woman towards her husband and her good dealings with him. These are all good acts on her part. None of that is obligatory upon her. If she refused to do any or all of that, she would not be sinful. In fact, he must do those jobs for her, and it is not permissible for him to force her to do any of them. This is what the woman does on a voluntary basis only. It is a beautiful custom that women have been following since the first generations until now. Only two things are obligatory upon the woman. Do you want to mention what they are? Are you guys interested or no? Cliffhanger or no? Just leave it? I don't know if the sisters are ready for that. Sisters ready? Okay. Play you. First of all, disclaimer, number one. Okay, there are some ulama who say that these things are obligatory. Okay, but I'm quoting Imam Nawawi here. Okay? However, the majority of the fuqaha have said that if a man gets married to a woman and a woman is not accustomed to cooking and cleaning and washing and all of these things, that it is obligatory upon the husband to provide for her someone to do these things around the house. And so for the guys that, this whole concept of I'm going to get married so I can have a younger version of my mom, cook and clean and do all of these things and wash my clothes and all of that, this is not the understanding of what the Prophet ﷺ did. Aisha radiallahu anha says that the Prophet ﷺ would fix his own shoes and sew his own shirts whenever they became threadbare. So Imam Nawawi says all of that is extra on the part of the woman. It's not obligatory upon her. And some ulama have said that the woman could even request an allowance or some type of fee for the services that she provides around the house. Imam Nawawi said, only two things are obligatory upon the woman: keeping herself ready and prepared, and that is a euphemism for the married people. You already understand what I'm saying. And the second one is, if the husband requests her to stay at home, that she must obey him. Everything else, Imam Nawawi says, is not obligatory upon the wife. We know obviously from other hadith that the man cannot prevent the woman from going to the masjid. Okay? From the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar. But apart from that, Imam Nawawi's specific opinion was, only those two things are obligatory upon her. That means that what? If I get married, Imam Nawawi is thinking, if I get married, I got to do everything else. I don't have time to cook. I don't have time to clean. I don't have time to do this. I don't have the money to provide a servant in the house. Therefore, I'm not going to do it. Does that make, that's Imam Nawawi's perspective. And I'm feeling the death stares from some of the brothers, so my apologies, guys. Play you. Okay. So going very quickly, inshallah, I wanted to tell a very nice story with regards to when I said Imam Nawawi went to go and visit the Sultan many, many different times. On one particular instance, I wanted to share this because the story was very, very nice. The Sultan of Zahir, Baybars, was during the time of the Mongols. And if you're familiar with the Mongol Empire, they did not have any type of reservation about raiding and pillaging villages. So it was of the utmost importance for the people at that time to make sure that their boundaries were secured from the Mongols. So the Sultan decided to raise the taxes on people to pay for the extra soldiers and armies and equipment required to protect the periphery of the nation from attacking Mongols. Does that make sense? Kind of like what your president wants to do today. He wants to raise your taxes so that you can pay for the wall in the south. So does the argument sound, pretend you are a Muslim in Damascus at this time. Does the request sound perhaps not favorable, but is it understandable? I'm paying into my own security. And if you know anything about history, the Mongols were a very clear and present danger. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. There's no difference of opinion on that. The Mongols were a deep threat, a major threat. So he raised the taxes to pay for these extra security. Imam Nawawi goes to the Sultan to complain about the raising of taxes, and this is what Imam Nawawi says. So the Sultan asked for a fatwa from the scholars that would allow him to take the money from the citizens in order to use it in his battles against the Mongols. The scholars of Asham, of all Syria, Palestine, and Lebanon, wrote a fatwa for the Sultan. Okay, here's the fatwa for you to allow you to collect this money, no problem. So the Sultan asked, did any scholar refuse to sign off on this fatwa? Who do you think refused? Imam Nawawi. So Imam Nawawi was brought to the palace of the Sultan. And the Sultan asked him personally in front of everybody else, I need you to sign this letter right now. I need you to sign this fatwa right now. I need you to give me legitimacy right now. And Imam Nawawi still refused. So the Sultan asked him why. He said, I know that you used to be a slave of the Amir bin Duqar. Okay, so the powers of the Seljuk Empire that were during this time, where the servants of the previous, what would you call it, regime, okay? And over time, the power of balance shifted, so now the servants and the slaves were now actually the people in power. So Imam Nawawi is talking to the Sultan, yes, but he's reminding him, hey, you were a former slave. So, remember where you came from. He says, I know that you used to be the slave of the Amir bin Duqar, and you did not have any wealth. Then Allah bestowed His bounty upon you, and you became the ruler. I have heard that you have 1,000 male slaves, and each one of them has a saddle's weight worth of gold. And you have 200 slave girls, and each of them has a portion of gold jewelry. If you spend all of that, and you leave your slaves with straps and dyes instead of gold saddles, and you leave the slave girls with their clothing and no jewelry, then I will give you a fatwa that you can take wealth from the people. But how is that in contrast to our modern day, current day politicians? Millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in their personal accounts, and yet what? They raise public funds to run their own political campaigns. They have people, just like you and me, support their bids for power. All the while, what happens, any of you take political science, what happens to the money after they contributed it to a campaign? Do you ever think about that? You donate the money to a campaign. The candidate wins or loses, doesn't matter. They don't use all of the money for the campaign. What happens to it? Do they give it back to you? So what happens to it? Goes into their own trust for their next political venture. But Imam Nawawi is saying, how dare you take from the people when you yourself have gold this and 100 this and 200 of that? How dare you ask the people to tighten the screws on their lifestyles when you are living the most lavish lifestyle out of everybody? So you want us to provide you, you need to be a role model and an example and show us what sacrifice actually means. So Imam Nawawi made sure that that the Sultan did so before signing off on that fatwa. And the last couple of things, inshallah, before we move on to hadith number 1, with regards to the works of Imam Nawawi. Imam Nawawi died, I said, at the age of 44. He did not start writing until the age of 32. Okay? So Imam Nawawi did not start writing until the age of 32. Have you heard of the Sheikh Salah al-Sawi, contemporary Sheikh? Have you heard of him? So Sheikh Salah, when he was about 18, 20 years old, wrote a small book on a particular subject within Islamic legal theory, usul al-fiqh. He was 20 years old. That book was so popular, so amazing, so profound, that my own Islamic legal theory teacher in Medina was referencing the book. So it was, and it's something that the Sheikh wrote when he was 20 years old. Sheikh Salah himself said, "I wish that I never wrote anything before the age of 40." He said, "I wish I could go back and wait until I was 40 to start writing. Because before 40 years old, people lack knowledge and wisdom and understanding." Why do you think prophets become prophets at the age of? Because that's when balagha ashuddahu. That's when a man has reached his strength and capacity, not physical strength, but has reached his mental strength. And that's why prophets become prophets at the age of 40, and that's why Imam Nawawi decided to wait so long to write before he wrote any of his books. There are three major books that I want to mention to you that you should know as students of knowledge. Number one, obviously, Riyadh al-Salihin. Okay? The book that is very frequently read after Salah and in gatherings. Imam Nawawi compiled this book predominantly from Bukhari and Muslim and Tirmidhi and others. And he organized it into chapters according to the chapter of sincerity, the chapter of commanding what is good and forbidding what is evil, and different other books. He also wrote a commentary on Sahih Muslim. We know that there are two major hadith works in our tradition, the top two. The first one is Sahih Bukhari, okay, and the other one is Sahih Muslim. Okay? Sahih Muslim, Imam Nawawi wrote an explanation for Sahih Muslim. We're talking thousands of ahadith. Okay? He wrote an explanation to this entire collection of ahadith, and it is head and shoulders the most famous commentary on Sahih Muslim. And the most, remember how I said his speciality was fiqh? He wrote several books in fiqh for the Shafi'i madhab. His magnum opus was a book called Al-Majmu'. And Al-Majmu' was a book, not a Shafi'i book, but it was a comparative fiqh work. Every madhab has a work that is comparative in nature. Okay? So every madhab, and just to kind of give you an understanding of how the schools of the madhabs work, each madhab has a primer. Each madhab has an introductory work. Okay? So for the Hanafis, it might be what? Quduri, perhaps? Yes? As the first book. Okay? For the Shafi'is who have Matan Abi Shuja' and so on and so forth. The comparative work in the Hanafi madhab is Hashit Ibn Abidin. Okay? It not only is he's a Hanafi scholar, but he mentions all of the opinions from the different madhabs. Al-Majmu' is the same way, written by Imam Nawawi. He is a Shafi'i scholar and definitely talks about the Shafi'i opinions, but it's comparative in nature. So he talks about all of the different opinions from all of the madhab. I have the book at home, it's like 20-something volumes. Right? So, and all of, and Hashid Abidin, Al-Istidhkar for the Malikis, and Mughni for the Hanbalis, they're all these major comparative works. And lastly, the death of Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi. Imam Nawawi was eventually expelled out of Damascus by the Sultan. I wonder why. Imam Nawawi went back to his hometown of Nawa, where he was from. He passed away on the 24th of Rajab, 676 after Hijrah, about 1277 Common Era. It was said about him that he reached the peak in 3 areas of his life. And should anyone be willing to mount a camel, and travel in order to seek it, they should. Meaning that these three things are so important. He reached the pinnacle in all three. And if you wanted just one of these three things, you should be willing to ride a camel and go and seek it. That's how important they are. Number one, his level of knowledge, his ilm. Okay. No doubt, as we saw from this brief introduction, that Imam Nawawi had the knowledge of far beyond the people around him. His asceticism, his ability to do with less, his ability to be content with few or with little. And the last thing is, Imam Nawawi, as we saw with stories from the Sultan, he would command what is good and he would forbid what is evil. Al-amr bil-ma'ruf wa nahi an al-munkar. Okay. Any questions about Imam Nawawi before we continue with hadith number 1? Okay. Imam Nawawi says, on the translation, on the authority of the commander of the faithful, Abu Hafs, Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiallahu anhu, who said, I heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam saying, this is hadith number 1 of the 40, surely all actions are but by their intentions, and verily every man shall have that which he intended. Thus, he whose migration was for Allah and His Messenger, then his migration was for Allah and His Messenger. And he whose migration was to achieve some worldly benefit, or to take a woman in marriage, his migration was for that which he migrated to. This hadith is related by both Bukhari and Muslim. So there's no question about its authenticity. First, let me provide some context for this hadith. During the time of the Hijrah, when the Prophet ﷺ and his companions were migrating from Mecca to Medina, remember, some companions went before the Prophet ﷺ, one companion in particular went with the Prophet ﷺ, and some companions even made Hijrah after the Prophet ﷺ. So on one particular occasion, Umar radiallahu anhu was discussing about a particular individual who was making hijrah for the sake of getting married. There was a particular woman in Medina who would not marry this Sahabi unless he migrated to Medina. So this companion was making hijrah not for Allah and His Messenger, but for what? To marry this woman. So when the Prophet ﷺ was informed about this situation, the Prophet ﷺ said the following statement. He said, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that indeed actions are by their intentions. وَلِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى, and for every individual is what they intended. فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. And whoever's hijrah was for Allah and His Messenger, then his hijrah was for Allah and His Messenger. وَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ لِإِمْرَأَةٍ يُنْكِحُهَا أو للدنيا يصيبها فهجرته لما هاجر إليه. The Prophet ﷺ said that whoever migrated then to marry a woman or for some worldly benefit, then that person's hijrah is for what that person intended it to be. Okay? This hadith, the ulama have said, is the most comprehensive hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. This hadith is the first hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari. Remember I said that one of the two primary works of hadith? This is the first hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari. It is the first hadith in Imam Nawawi's collection here. It is the first hadith in many, many other collections as well. Why? I think it's very self-evident. You cannot hope to achieve any type of reward from Allah without being sincere. Sincerity is, as the Prophet ﷺ said, the driving force behind our actions. The value of the action is determined largely in part by the intention, regardless of what the action is. Okay? Punishments in the Sharia can be lessened or increased according to what the intention of the person is, despite what the action might be. I kill somebody, my intention is going to determine whether I get the death penalty or whether I just have to pay the blood money, the diya. Does that make sense? So intention in and of itself plays a very, very large part in the value of that deed. This hadith touches upon almost every deed in Islam. Think about an act of worship that this particular hadith has no effect on. Can you think of one? There may be one or two acts of worship that you can do without an intention, with khilaf on certain issues. By and large, every single act of ibadah, of worship, must have an intention accompanied with it. How do you know that I'm praying fajr and not simply doing calisthenics? What's the difference? Or better yet, what's the difference between me praying 2 rak'ahs of sunnah and 2 rak'ahs of fajr? What's the difference? The intention. What's the difference between being sinful in Ramadan by fasting nawafil instead of fasting the fard? What's the difference? The intention. So the intention is the driving force behind our actions. Imam Abu Dawood, who is one of the major scholars of hadith in our tradition, said, this hadith is one half of Islam. This hadith by itself is one half of Islam. Other ulama like Imam al-Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad said, this hadith is 1/3 of knowledge. And the reason that they gave, or the reason that Imam al-Bayhaqi says was their reason why, was because Iman, faith. How do we as Muslims manifest faith? Give me examples. How do we manifest faith? So actions, okay, what else? Actions of the heart, right? Tawakkul, okay? Reliance on Allah. Is that an action of the heart, tongue, or limbs? It's of the heart. Yes, is it not? I have tawakkul in my heart. It's an action of the heart. What else? We said actions of the heart, actions of the limbs, actions of the heart. What's missing? Actions of the tongue, correct? These three things are how we are able to earn reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Imam al-Shafi'i and Ahmad are saying that intention is 1/3 of these things because the heart is 1/3 of all of these actions. And without the intention, how can we hope to gain the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Very good. The narrator of this hadith is Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu was the one who heard this hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Umar ibn al-Khattab grew up in Mecca. His father was known to be very, very rough with him. His father was known to be an individual who was extremely harsh with his son. And the personality of his father was known to be the type of very harsh type of personality. And we see that sometimes reflected in the personality of Umar. We know that when we're asked to describe what was the personality of Umar like, one of the words that people would use to describe him is what? He's strong, he's harsh perhaps. But we also know that there's instances where Umar radiallahu anhu would show tenderness and kindness as well. So Umar radiallahu anhu grew up in this type of environment. And when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to accept Islam, what was the reaction of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? I'm going to go on a tangent here, okay? I'll end with this tangent because it's a long tangent, but I promise it's worth it, inshallah. When the Prophet, when Umar radiallahu anhu came to accept Islam, where did he meet the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Huh? Darul Arqam. Okay, Darul Arqam, the secret clubhouse of the Muslims during this time. He knocks on the door, Umar, and the companions look through the window, and they start to panic. And they say, it's Umar, and he has his sword with him. Because what happened? He was on his way to go and meet with his, he was to contextualize, he was in the town, he was in Mecca. He was walking around with his sword, looking very upset, walking towards as if he was going to go and kill the Prophet ﷺ. A companion asked him, where are you going? He said, I'm going to go and kill the messenger. The companion told him, well, why don't you go and check your own house because your sister accepted Islam. So he went to go and check on his sister. After that, he still has his sword with him, and he goes to the house of Dar al-Arqam. So now, they open the window, they look outside, they see Umar radiallahu anhu, and he has his sword with him, and they start to panic. It's Umar and he has his sword with him. So Hamza radiallahu anhu says what? Let him in. I'll take care of him. Don't worry about him. So Umar walks in, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, send Umar to me, I'll speak with Umar. So Umar goes to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and how does he greet Umar? Does anybody know the story? Good. He didn't grab him by his hands and say, Umar, it's so good to see you. Where have you been? It's been a long time. We missed you. No. He literally grabbed Umar by the shirt and he started to shake him. And he said, Ya Umar, why are you here? Why have you come? Leave us alone. Umar was tough, and the Prophet ﷺ was tough with Umar. And here's the tangent that I'm going on. One of the beautiful things about the Prophet ﷺ was his ability to interact with people according to their level. Okay? Amr ibn al-As who came to the Prophet ﷺ and asked him the most famous hadith you've probably ever heard. Okay? What is one of the most famous hadiths you've ever heard? Ya Rasulullah, man ahabbu nasi ilayka. Ya Rasulullah, who is the most beloved person to you? Have you all heard this hadith before? Okay? Especially the women, right? They all memorize the answer also. The Prophet ﷺ said, Aisha. Yes? Now, this might not be a very tantalizing hadith or an interesting hadith, a noteworthy hadith. But let me contextualize it for you because in fact it is very, very tantalizing. It is very, very interesting. Who was Amr ibn al-As? Remember, Amr ibn al-As was the one who, after the second migration of the Muslims to Abyssinia, chased the Muslims to Abyssinia. He's the one that spoke to Najashi in the court. He's the one that tried to convince Najashi to let the Muslims go and bring them back to Mecca. Amr ibn al-As was the one that when he came to Medina to accept Islam, he sat at the feet of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said, I am ready to accept Islam, but I have one condition. The Prophet ﷺ said, okay, what is your condition? Amr ibn al-As said, I am afraid that when I accept Islam and I lower my guard, that your companions are going to come and kill me. Because he remembered all of the things that he did against the Muslims in Jahiliyyah. And he was afraid that the companions were going to do what? Take revenge on him for that. And the response of the Prophet ﷺ was what? Ya Amr, al-Islam yajubu ma qablahu. Islam wipes out everything that came before it. This same individual who chased the Muslims to Abyssinia, who was afraid for his life when he accepted Islam, this same individual had the audacity and the courage to go to the Prophet ﷺ and ask him, Ya Rasulullah, who is the most beloved person to you? Why is that surprising now? How is it possible that Amr, in the span of less than 2 years, would go from fearing for his life to asking the question, who is the most beloved person to you? Now, why is that such an awkward or weird question? Let me ask you a question. Why would you ask your mother or your father, who's your favorite child? Or why would you ask your employer, who's your favorite employee? Or why would you ask your friend, who's your best friend? Why would you ask them that question? Why? Because you expect to be the answer. Yes? So Amr ibn al-As is asking him, Ya Rasulullah, man ahabbu nasi ilayka? And he's sitting back like this, waiting for what? Ya Amr, of course, you. Was there any doubt? But then the Prophet's response was what? Aisha. So Amr said, okay, hold on, wait, time out. Let me clarify the question because apparently there was some confusion. Min al-rijal, from the men. Now, khalas, there's no room for misinterpretation. قال أبوها. He said her father. قال ثم من. قال عمر. Then Umar. قال ثم من. قال عثمان. Then he said Uthman. The hadith says that Amr ibn al-As stopped asking the question because he didn't know when the Prophet ﷺ was going to reach his name. How is it possible that Amr would go from fearing for his life to being able, so noble and brave, to ask this question of the Prophet ﷺ? And I'll tell you how. Because the Prophet ﷺ, when he would interact with people, he would make people feel as if he were their best friend. He knew how to interact with people according to their level. When Umar came into that house, how did he interact with Umar? He was stuffed and stern, yes? So the Prophet ﷺ was stern in return. When Uthman radiallahu anhu entered upon the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr and Umar, how was the Prophet ﷺ sitting? The hadith says that the Prophet ﷺ was sitting like this, leaning back, with his shirt buttons undone, and his garment above his knees. And as soon as Uthman walks in, what does the Prophet ﷺ do? Covers his knees, buttons his shirt, sits up straight. So Umar radiallahu anhu asked him later on, he said, Ya Rasulullah, when it was just me and Abu Bakr, you were comfortable, you were relaxed. But then as soon as Uthman walked in, you completely changed. Why? And we all know the response. The Prophet ﷺ said what? He said, how can I not be shy in front of the one whom angels are shy from? You see, it was said about Uthman radiallahu anhu that he was so shy that he would never go completely unclothed even in his own house. It was said that Uthman radiallahu anhu, when he would shower, that he would crouch down to hide his nakedness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah sees all things. The Prophet ﷺ said that every ummah has a defining characteristic. Every ummah has one characteristic that defines who the ummah should be. And the Prophet ﷺ said that the defining characteristic of this ummah is modesty. وَأَشَدُّ أُمَّتِي حَيَاءً. And the most shy person from my ummah is Uthman. So the Prophet ﷺ, when this shy person would walk into his company, the Prophet ﷺ would be shy with him. Likewise, when it came time to having fun and messing around and playing a joke, the Prophet ﷺ was able to do that as well. There was a companion by the name of Zahir ibn al-Haram radiallahu anhu. One of the things about Zahir that we know about was that he had very low self-esteem because he suffered from some type of physical deformity. Zahir radiallahu anhu on one occasion was in the marketplace of Medina doing what businessmen do, buying and selling. Zahir was known to love to pull practical jokes on people. He was a jokester. So one day the Prophet ﷺ said, I'm going to pull a joke on Zahir. So the Prophet ﷺ sneaks up behind Zahir and he grabs him from the back. And he starts to shout in the marketplace, who will buy this slave from me? Zahir was a free man. Was the Prophet ﷺ lying? Yeah, Jameel, was he lying? So how do we understand his statement? Slave of Allah. So he says, who will buy this slave from me? Zahir didn't know who was behind him. So he's trying to fight off this person, hey, who are you, get off me. And then he turns and he sees that it's the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And he says, when I saw it was the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam, I wish that he would never let me go. But then I turned to the Prophet ﷺ and I told him, Ya Rasulullah, I'm afraid if you try and sell me, you won't make very much money. The Prophet ﷺ turned to Zahir and he told him, but indeed, Ya Zahir, in the sight of Allah, you are very expensive. Is it any surprise, Ya Jama'ah? Now, what caused Amr ibn al-As to think that he was the Prophet's best friend? Look at how the Prophet ﷺ would interact with the people around him. Look at how the Prophet ﷺ made every single person feel important. It was said that the Prophet ﷺ would not speak to anybody except that he would face them. That his chest would be pointed towards the person he was talking to. Nowadays, we would be lucky if our eyes were lifted from the phone as we talk to the person in front of us. But the Prophet ﷺ gave each person the respect that the inherent respect that they deserve for just being a human being. The Prophet ﷺ, what was it going? SubhanAllah. The 2-minute warning. That messed me up. Let me see. Yes, the Prophet ﷺ would interact with people according to their level. If the person is stern, he would be stern. If they were shy, they were shy. If they liked to play jokes, he would play jokes with them. This, and I'll end with this, this is the wisdom of the da'i. This is the wisdom of the person that calls to Islam. We think that when we give da'wah, the people that we interact with need to conform to our level of the message. But remember that the Prophet ﷺ was a Nabi to all of mankind. Is mankind of one level of intelligence? Or one sense of humor? Or one level of emotional intelligence? No. People are of different levels and intelligence and all of that. So the Prophet, as the Prophet to mankind, tailored his message to fit the different levels of people. And that's how he was able to be effective. We cannot expect to give the same message to everybody that we meet and then scratch our heads and wonder, well, how come everybody's not accepting Islam? How come everybody isn't responding to my call? The Prophet ﷺ spent time with people getting to know who they were. How did he know Umar was tough? How did he know Uthman was shy? How did he know Zahid was a jokester? He spent time with them. And when he was successful in determining their personality, he tailored his message to fit that personality type, to connect with that person heart to heart. And when you have the hearts of people, wallahi, you can tell them to do anything. And the Prophet ﷺ, apart from being a master in being eloquent in speech, he was a master of earning the people's hearts. And if you want to be effective in your da'wah, in your call to people, in your interactions with people, you first have to win the hearts over. And that is the most difficult job of all. To figure out who is this person that I'm sitting in front of. How can I get to know them? Because wallahi, I'll tell you that people feel your sincerity. People will feel if you're being genuine with them. People will feel if you actually care about them. People will feel if the hearts are being connected. And when the hearts can be connected, you will be effective in your message. Conversely, people can also tell if you're being insincere or disingenuous. People can tell, this guy just wants my money. Or this guy is just trying to convince me of something. Or he doesn't really mean it. Haven't you ever felt that way about somebody? The hearts communicate with one another. And until we fix the communication between the hearts, will never be able to fix the communication between the minds. So, ya Jama'ah, I implore all of you, if you want to be like the Prophet ﷺ, win the hearts of people over. Get them on your side, and you will be more effective in what it is you try to achieve and gain out of those individuals. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us all like the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and reunite us with Amr ibn al-As and Umar and Uthman and Zahid and all the rest of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in the highest parts of paradise. I'll give a few minutes if anybody has any questions, inshallah. Nobody?
All right, Jazakallah khair. Again, apologize